Mike Breeden is making his UFC debut. He lost his fight on the Contender Series last year in 2020, and he's facing off against a dude who has had a very hot start in the UFC, right? But then has kind of simmered down, his alternated win-loss, but nonetheless, he should not be played with. He should not be toyed with. This is a killer he's stepping in there against in Alexander the Great Hernandez, who opens up as a minus 500 favorite with the comeback of plus 380 on Mike Money Breeden, man. So let's start off with Mike Breeden. Interesting character. Blood and guts fighter as well, man. I wanted to say the one thing that stood out to me from watching film on him is this dude is tough, bro. Like, he eats shots. In that Dana White Contender Series matchup, man, his legs, both legs were getting crippled, and he was still walking forward like a savage. And I'm like, it's so hard to do that when you're literally limping. You're like, oh shit, man, I can't walk, but I'm still walking forward, and I'm gonna whoop your ass. And it reminds me of a fight that took place a couple weeks back where it was basically the same situation. I don't remember the fighters' names, unfortunately, but this dude was, or actually it was Ryan Benoit. There we go. Ryan Benoit. Do you remember his fight? I think it was, I don't know if it was against Zaruk Adashev. It might have been, or maybe it was the fight before that, but his legs were getting tore up, but he was still pushing the pressure. He was the one that was following the other dude around the cage. And he was saying, listen, man, I could be on a broken leg. And I think he did break his leg in that fight. He's like, I could be on a broken leg and I'm still going to push the action. That type of fighter, I really respect. What do you think, AJ?
Yeah, man, Mike Breeden, he's an absolute dog in there too. And I think one of the things I was watching his Dana White Contender Series fight, and his coach was saying he's fighting on Glory MMA too. I don't remember exactly which coach it was. But either way, regardless, they were saying that he's a crowd favorite fighter, and that is the truth, man. He's down to bring the absolute war and great kicks as well. He does what I like to, or I guess what I like seeing, but it's kind of not as good for him as a fighter. He'll sit there and take pictures once he does land a couple shots. So he's very much down to trade, down for the war. And he likes volume too, man. So you're looking for volume strikes all day long with this cat, man. Mike Breeden. It's interesting to see. I'm sure it's a late minute replacement because he did get the L on the Dana White Contender Series. Usually they don't get a contract after that. But this one's going to be a fun one, man, especially against Alexander Hernandez, who's also very much the same, kind of growing into where he wants to be in the future. Mike Breeden's up for a hell of a task, Derek. What you think?
Well, I will say, just speaking on that Dana White Contender Series type situation, so one thing that is a new revelation that Dana White has been talking about, he's like, listen, man, if you lose on the Contender Series, even if you win, and we don't sign you, go win a couple fights in other promotions, and then if you do string some good wins together, we'll sign you to the UFC. That's like the unspoken agreement that they're starting to have, right? So I'm not super surprised that he's here and he's making his UFC debut because UFC is signing more fighters than ever because of COVID and all that good stuff. But yeah, man, he's patient on the feet, very tough, walks through the fire, but he has very little head movement, and I think that's going to be an issue when you're fighting Alexander Hernandez, who has let's just say a crispy right cross, man. I'll tell you what. And I think it was against Chris Grutzmacher, man. He was just hitting him with the 1-2 all day. 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, landing him, man. He's heavy on that lead leg, which might spell a couple of issues because Mike Breeden has good calf kicks and good body kicks. But nonetheless, when we're talking about levels, man, I think they're just on two different levels personally. So it's evident why Mike Breeden is a plus 380 underdog here. However, Alexander Hernandez seems to have had more of a mental lapse in his fight style than he has a physical one, man. This dude is a physical specimen. He's chiseled like an Adonis, man. He looks like a Greek god in there. But what do you think happened in his last fight against Thiago Moises, and do you think that's going to translate to this fight against Mike Breeden?
I just think he struggles with the elite fighters, and I definitely agree with you. I think it's a mental thing. I mean, he's Alexander Hernandez is quickly becoming a veteran of the game, but it seems like he's not necessarily fighting his fight when he gets in there against the top of the cream of the crop in there, man. He does, and everything looks good. His punches, his kicks, especially against Thiago Moises. He was smart. He was defending the takedown. He had the good stance for it. It just wasn't quite working. Thiago Moises was able to counter everything, see everything coming. It looked like he was just Alexander Hernandez was just a step behind. I don't think that's going to be the case with this one coming up, though.
Yeah, hopefully not. I think that if he wants to win the fight, and when he's at his best, he's pushing the pressure. He is the guy who's walking in there. But there's this thing that's interesting, and I've been studying a lot of these boxing coaches who are talking about certain ranges, right? And they're like, there's a certain range that you fight if you're a certain height. And it's interesting because I never really thought about it like that. But Alexander Hernandez, the difference between versus Grutzmacher versus Moises is that he stood outside, kind of at kicking range versus Moises, while he was in boxing boxing range against Grutzmacher. And I think that's the big difference is when his opponent earns his respect, right? So Moises earns the respect of Hernandez. It takes him a really long time to actually say, I'm going to close this distance. I'm going to walk through the fire, right? Where Mike Breeden is not scared to walk through the fire. So there's always that chance. Like anyone got a puncher's chance in this one, man. But when we're talking about well-roundedness, I think it would be a little, it'd be kind of smart for Hernandez to try to mix it up and wrestle a little bit in this fight, man. That's a big strength of his as well. And sometimes it feels like he just doesn't want to use it. Do you think wrestling is going to come into place in terms of this matchup?
I definitely think it should if you're Alexander Hernandez. Not so much Mike Breeden. I don't really see him going for much of any takedowns. But Alexander Hernandez, the thing is, I think he wants that payday. So he's looking for the haymakers, man. He's looking for the KO shots. He's really looking for the hands to start throwing. Yeah, you're right, Derek. And very much an up and down fighter. So he can take place. Wherever this fight can take place, he's good. Alexander Hernandez can do it. It's just if his mental game is cleared up enough to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I want to ask you this just about the evolution of Alexander Hernandez. Is this surprising to you? Because a lot of people don't know this and a lot of people forgot about this. Would it be a crazy thing to say if I told you, hey, man, did you know of the very few people who have been able to not only defeat but knock out Beneil Dariush? Alexander Hernandez is one of them.
Really? How early in the day? Back when?
It was his UFC debut. So this was just a couple years ago. Yeah, man. Ooh. So that's what I'm talking about. But that's the craziness about it, where it's like you start off on a really high note. He's got wins over fighters like Beneil Dariush, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Francisco Trinaldo, Chris Grutzmacher. You know what I'm saying? Like he's got wins over big fighters. But then losses against Moises, loss against Drew Dober, loss against Cowboy Cerrone. We remember that Cowboy Cerrone fight where everyone thought Hernandez was going to steamroll him, and then what happened? Papa Cerrone came through and said, no, not today, right? I do think at the end of the day for this one, man, Mike Breeden has his work cut out for him, truly. He has 8 knockout wins, 0 submission wins, 2 decision wins. So if he doesn't knock him out, he's going to have to outpoint him, and Alexander Hernandez, I think, is going to be motivated. He's going to be confident, and to me, don't get me wrong, AJ, this kind of seems like one of those fights to build the confidence of Alexander Hernandez, to say, all right, man, we're going to give you a little bit of a step down in competition because he's fought legit killers. So I'll give you a little bit of a step down in competition, let you get your confidence, your mojo back a little bit, man, and then we'll keep high rolling you, man. So ultimately, I know I've said ultimately a lot, but we're going to finally conclude on this one. -500 Alexander Hernandez. Are you rocking with that one?
Yeah, I'm rocking with Hernandez. I'm going KO round 1. I think I agree. I think this is one of those fights where they're like, all right, bro, you got to get this dub, get your confidence back. And if he doesn't, we're going to start seeing the decline of Alexander Hernandez, or maybe not, he's not going to get cut off of this one, but it's definitely going to be a very strict asterisk on his mark, man.
Yeah, I will say Alexander Hernandez is 4-3 in the UFC, so if he loses, he's going to go to 500. If he wins, that's the direction he needs to go, and I'm rocking with Alexander Hernandez on this one as well. I think it might be a little close in the beginning just because Mike Breeden, with that, I'm just going to walk through the flames. I love the mentality, but I do think it is going to land to a big knockout win for Hernandez. I'm going KO round 2 on this one, but I still am impressed by Mike Breeden, man. I just think you got to be a little more technical when you're fighting a monster like Alexander Hernandez, so...